Hey, welcome to the Soul Tree podcast. I've got a great guest for you here today. First, I wanted to say if you are someone who is interested in becoming a life coach or a wilderness guide, someone who wants to help other people reach their potential, someone who wants to learn how to bring someone through a transformative experience that involves nature connection, that involves learning how to work with the images of the mind, learning how to work with metaphor, learning how to work with a person's own innate ability to change, then check out earthbasedinstitute.org. Earthbasedinstitute.org. And at the Earth-Based Institute, we train what we call nature-connected coaches. And I think you might find it interesting if you've liked what you have been hearing on the show. So check it out. Andrew Joakim, welcome. It's a pleasure to have you on again. For those of you who don't know, Andrew has a very significantly successful. I think you've grown even significantly since the last talk we've had on YouTube, successful channel, and has basically been running a channel called Sorting Myself Out, where he has documented a process that he's gone through. And, feel free to fill in the gaps here, but things that I've seen are psychological changes that you've been documenting, personal goals, physical goals, weight loss, physique, strength, diet, relationship, mental, emotional health. I mean, really about everything. Would you say that's accurate?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I started off, because I have another YouTube channel, which now is just for Tongan language videos. But also before, like in my life, I've been in and out of shape many times. I've had times where I've had a goal and been making progressive towards it, and then other large periods where I was doing nothing. So I had tried before making a weight loss series, and I did. I went from, I think, 255 pounds to 195, and then gained most of it back. And then at that point in my life, I felt so addicted to marijuana that I knew it was an issue in my life, and that it was just affecting me and making me lazier than I already naturally was. And so at that point, that's when I first started listening to Jordan Peterson, tried doing the future authoring program. And finally, I was able to stop smoking marijuana by going through the future authoring program. And then, so when I set it to do that, I thought, hey, rather than just making videos about weight loss, what if I was to include all these other areas? So that was the idea when it started. And I think it was just over a year ago that I started doing that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and it's been pretty amazing to watch. Like, I remember the video that you did with Jordan, Dr. Peterson, and, just to watch the changes since then, it's been pretty cool. And even before that, like before you did that video, I think I said this in our last podcast when you came on, but just you look a lot healthier now, very, very much so.
Yeah, I saw a video that's not out from what I mentioned doing a weight loss video before. And I look back and I can just see, I feel like I look younger and healthier. It's gave me an odd feeling to see that.
Yeah. And see, that's why, I've in watching some of the YouTube comments where people, well, there are a couple of things that I want to say. One is you are a public figure on YouTube, right? I mean, that's 26,000 subscribers is no joke. So that people are watching you basically vulnerably disclose the details of your life. And I just found it, I find it distasteful when people use that platform as a way to attack your character versus, like, it's one thing if someone writes a comment that says, hey man, I have some questions for you. And these questions are based on some interesting contradictions or some interesting points that I've noticed that don't make sense to me personally. Can you please address these? That's different than saying, hey, you're an asshole and you screwed this up and you didn't do this right and you've been lying to us. And, those, like, how do you deal with that? I'm a pretty sensitive guy. Like, I'm not gonna cry at the drop of a hat or anything. But if I had to deal with scrutiny at that level, it would definitely impact me.
Yeah, I think I'm better at dealing with it now than when I first began.
Mm-hmm.
With both negative and positive. I used to look so often. There's a YouTube app called YouTube Studio where you're getting a constant feed of, oh, if you're earning any money, comments, likes, all these things.
Mm-hmm.
And I'd be equally affected by positive and negative comments, where I think one turning point was I commented on some Joe Rogan video. And in the video, he had said, I'm an entertainer. And so I just wrote, I think Joe Rogan is an entertainer, period. And the replies to that, just hateful comments. And I just thought, okay, no matter what I put, it's going to get a polarized reaction. So I've just come to expect it now. And
right.
The one that was most recent, someone pretty much called me out saying I'm a liar. I'm just doing it purely for likes and for money, and I'm manipulating people, and that they can't believe anything I say. And it had frustrated me, not from, or say one of the things they said was that, because I want to move to Tonga. That's something I've announced on my channel. For anyone who doesn't know, that's a country in the South Pacific, an island nation. And I've been talking about that in my channel. That's been a big, major point in my life.
Yeah,
I remember. He was saying, oh, the only reason you're wanting to do that is because it's clearly obvious that in Canada you're so low in that social hierarchy that you're looking to escape because it's a third world country and you're automatically at the top there. And it angered me because that's not the truth. And look, when he was calling me a liar, when I was younger, I used to lie quite a lot, little white lies. Like, say, when I first went to Australia to play rugby, it was my first time just being in a place where no one knew me at all. And it was at a time where the internet wasn't quite what it is today. And so just little things, like, say, one of my favorite television programs is The Office.
Mm-hmm.
And at that time, it wasn't being aired in Australia. So I could just reel off quotes as if it was me saying it for the first time and having people think I'm hilarious.
Right.
So now listening to Jordan Peterson and hearing him talk about what lies can do to yourself, I can just look back on that with regret and see that, I used to lie a lot more or quite often, where now one that I'm recently thinking of was an issue that I had before with work, that I was looking to get away to go volunteer in Samoa, and my work was wanting to train me for this new position. And I made up a lie. I said, I can't get a ride into work anymore, and went off about that, where I should have just said, look, I don't want to continue with this. I don't want to waste your time. I have an opportunity. But I was just more concerned about my reputation than my actual character. And then it weighed heavily on me for a long time that I ended up telling my friend about this. And it was a feeling of relief. So now, rather than looking for that feeling of relief after by being truthful, I just, right from the beginning, I catch myself at times where, say, in conversation with a friend, you just embellish some little story a little bit. I used to do that all the time. But now I'm just more aware of it, and I don't. So I've always had this issue of, if someone's calling me out and saying I'm lying when I know I'm not, it angers me so much.
Yeah, there's a lack of justice in that. It's uncalled for, and it's aggressive. And I think that, I got a ton of respect for the fact that you're engaging the people who are being divisive and unreasonable. And at the same time, it's like, why even give that the time of the day? You know what I mean? Like, that's the question I was curious about, what's even the point, but that's kind of a separate thing that we could talk about. But really, like, what you're saying seems super important, which is that you have worked on honesty for quite some time now, and what that's looked like is constantly having to reflect on what you're saying, and oh, that's not really my joke, or that's not really true. And even like something that you did recently which really impacted you felt guilty, and your conscience kicked in and you owned up to it. And see, that right there is the sign of someone who's working on themselves. It's not the sign of someone who's out there out to get other people, or trying to manipulate in order to bolster themselves up in the world. See, that to me, like people who say stuff like that, it's almost like they're out for blood. And it doesn't matter what you say. It doesn't matter how honest you are. It doesn't matter how articulate you are. It doesn't matter how much you've proven yourself. Because I've seen videos of you where you just strip yourself away and you're like, listen, man, this is what's been going on. I started getting, my ego started getting involved with this. I started thinking that these videos were all about this when I'm not sure if that's what they should be about. Like, you have been pretty damn vulnerable, I think is fair to say. So I just thought I'd take a minute here to kick off the show just to address that, because it just seems completely out of left field and almost a waste of time to even respond to that person. And I also respect if you have, any reason why that response is valid or needed. So,
well, it's been tricky. So when I made my first video, I guess what I was accused of was that when I first made my introductory video to the channel saying, hey, I'm Andrew, I'm 32, I live with my parents, I've never had a girlfriend, I don't have a solid career or any direction in life, and I'm going to be taking you through my journey as I try to do the future authoring program and get my act together. And then the next video I revealed a little bit more. Like, you can only pack so much into a video, and the next one I say, well, I never really had a girlfriend, but I was married. But I don't consider that I was in an actual relationship in the same way that I could say, well, in the fifth grade, I had a girlfriend. We
count it.
We didn't spend any time together whatsoever. So same with this girl that I married. I mean, I called her my girlfriend, but after finding out that she never had any feelings for me whatsoever, right, didn't even really like me as a friend. And, right, we weren't intimate. We didn't have any time alone. So looking back, it's like, no, I wasn't really in a relationship. So if he wants to define that as a relationship and thinks I'm a liar for it, okay, sure. But what I found by each time, by opening up and being honest and just getting comments and getting a little kick out of that, of getting these positive comments, each time it enabled me to just be a little more open, to the point where I think looking back, I just opened up too much. So at a point where I had that talk with Jordan Peterson, and then I remember it was one day, I'm not sure if he still uses it, but he had a clips channel, and he put a clip of our interview, and it was me talking about my issues with intercourse, sexual intercourse, that is, and masturbation. And I just felt so embarrassed and thought, like, what have I done? Like, this is just out there for anyone to see.
It's tough, man.
And so part of this, where I stopped talking about certain things, and people are saying, hey, we signed up for this because you said you were going to talk about these things. And so I've been stuck between thinking, is it a matter of in for a penny, in for a pound, or should I just, there's been many times where I thought, you know what, I've created this thing that I can't handle now, maybe I should delete it. Where I'm at the point now of just thinking, I'm just not fussed about it. I'll put out videos as I can. I do have a desire to get to the point where I can use it as an actual tool that's going to help me and help others, because for a long time it just became more of a source of shame and thinking that I'm not going to be able to really sort myself out, and my habits are so strong, I can't change them, I'm not going to do this. But now I just feel a lot more relaxed about it, and I'm currently in the process of doing my future authoring program for the 4th time now that I finally know what I want. So once that's settled, then that's when I plan on getting back to being consistent with it, because I'm going to make that a part of my future authoring plan and write out what it could be, and get that motivation back to actually be consistent with it.
Will you explain the future authoring program real quick for people?
Yep. So it was created by Dr. Jordan B. Peterson to lay out a path forward. You get to pick what you want in life. You think of what's your ideal future. You also come up with a future of how things would be if all of your bad habits get worse. And I think I always knew that you have to in life just write down what it is you want, make a plan. It's not just going to happen by itself. I'd heard many people say that. I think it's just a great tool, a great program for getting very specific. Where if you were to just sit down by yourself with a blank piece of paper, write out what you want and write out a plan for it, it would be very difficult. Now, the future authoring program can be difficult and can take a long time. And the advice I heard from Dr. Peterson was that at first you're going to find that you think, I'll do it when I have enough time to do it, which is wrong. No, just try to do a little bit as you can. And also you may think at first like, well, I don't know exactly what I want, which was the case for me. Then his advice would be, well, just do a bad version of it. And then it's sort of like, say you're playing darts or target practice where you throw that first one out based off of what you think and you see it was off. And then you adjust and you correct for that to continually get closer to your target. And so that's what's happened for me. My first time, I didn't know what I want because I was stuck between thinking, do I want to live in Tonga? Do I want to live in Canada? What do I want to do? I didn't know, but I at least knew what I wanted to avoid. And that's what enabled me to stop abusing cannabis.
Right. That's great. Yeah, and just back to your point around how you kind of thrust yourself into you thrust yourself into this platform of vulnerability and then feeling, oh my God, what have I done? I mean, I can relate to that in small ways, in my own ways, where I've, done stuff like that in the past, where I've become very vulnerable and just on the spur of the moment with my courage, just let things go that maybe I wouldn't have said in other situations. And the feeling is it's like an emotional hangover or something. You wake up first thing in the morning and just have that feeling in my stomach. I've even had it like where I'll wake up in the middle of the night and feel like, oh my gosh, like what did I say? And it doesn't even have to be something bad. I could have just like disclosed a part of myself that I don't show very often. Or I could have said something that was just really different than what maybe my normal social self would present to the world. And it can just like really shake up your homeostasis. It takes a lot of energy. And so I can understand why that became difficult for you. And I think that it's so like, I don't know, it seems to me to be okay to have some boundaries with this is my personal life and this is my public life. That seems fine, like a fine line to draw.
Yeah, I'm trying to find the best way to address that because, as we were just saying, this person who commented on my video, I think that's where they're coming from. That look, when this person signed up, they had an expectation of me talking about certain things and being completely open and honest. And so one issue, there was a few weeks, I can't remember when it was, sometime in winter, where I had thought, okay, I can just have a little bit of cannabis and I'll be in control with it. And it got out of control and I got back to having it every day for a couple of weeks. And as I was going through that, I thought, well, like every day I kept telling myself, okay, this is the last day. I'm not going to have it tomorrow. So I didn't address it because in my mind, it wasn't that big of a deal. But then I admitted to it. And that's where I get confused when people are getting upset saying, well, you were lying to us. Well, if I was really lying about it, I wouldn't have mentioned that it happened. So,
well,
yeah.
Right. And what are they supposed to be, your supervisors for your, like, are they the ones who are supposed to monitor your transformational process? Is that their job? No, it's not their job. That's your job. That's up to you. It's not up. So it's just silly. It's just silly if if I have something to say to someone who's actually putting themselves out there, who's actually trying to change things in their life, and I'm just watching YouTube videos, I'm not doing anything on my own, it's really easy to, it's like, what, don't you have something better to do than to roast this guy over the coals right now? Like, that's kind of what came up for me. You know, it's like, what's going on in your life? You know, like, why don't you sort yourself out instead of roasting Andrew about how he told you two different things in the last couple of years? Like, he changed. He's a person. Like, give him a break. Like, that's what came up for me. And I think, like, to bring this back to something valuable for the listeners and not to just make it about getting heated or controversial or whatever, I think that the point really is, like, it's much easier as a bystander to someone who's passing by, just watching. It's much easier to have criticism. It's a lot harder to look at myself and say, well, where are the hypocrisies in my life? Where have I contradicted myself? What do I need to work on? And then when, instead of getting angry when someone else says something different, I can be supportive and say, oh, like, I hope that change really is true for you. I hope that is something that really is the best possible future that you could step into, rather than a hostile criticism. Does that make sense, Andrew?
Yeah, definitely. And I mean, to be fair to the guy, I've been guilty of it myself, just maybe not as in depth as this guy went into, but just, silly little comments here and there on other people who are on social media. And also, I think there's probably an element of him being frustrated by things that he sees in me that are also in himself. I know I definitely do that, especially with family members and close friends. Where I get frustrated by them is elements that I also see in myself. Like, one close friend of mine is just really bad with saying, okay, yeah, we'll do that in 5 minutes or 10 minutes. And then I've just come to expect, if he says 5 minutes, I know that that's at least 30 minutes.
Right.
The frustration comes from, I know that I can do that myself. So I'm trying to think maybe that's probably a part of it as well.
Yeah, I think that would be a fair guess to make. And really the point behind this and what you're saying is to always bring it back to ourselves, because that's the cliche in the circles that I run in with coaching and therapeutic processes and, wilderness guiding it's like always taking it back to what's my part. How can I show up for this situation? This is where I end and this is where you begin. So how can I take care of my space so that I at least have a better shot of engaging you in a positive way? And it's tough work. I'm right there with you, man. Like, I'm not 100% on that. Like, I screw that up. I get projective with other people. I get into disputes. I get angry. I get resentful. It's not like I'm saying that I'm immune to this. One thing I'm saying is it's super important to be aware of it. Like you're saying, like, okay, I'm noticing this. I get angry about this. And part of that is because that actually is something about me.
Well, I was actually thinking about this, I think just yesterday. I remember in a job interview, this fella asked me, how would you handle a situation with a coworker where you're having an argument or a dispute? What would you do? And I said something along the lines of, well, it takes two to tango. First, I'd look at myself. What am I contributing to this, rather than thinking it's all this other person's fault? I try to examine what I'm doing and try to change. And then if I found that the issue was persisting, I'd say to this other person, look, I'm finding that we're having an issue. Here's what I think is happening. And then if that didn't have any effect and it still continued, then at that point I'd escalate it to a manager, which sounds like a good answer in an interview and is something that I ought to do. But then I had a conflict at work with a coworker, of someone who was training me. I just felt like they were wanting me to fail, expecting me to fail, and had boxed me in. Where, yeah, looking back on it now, I don't think I did. I don't think I did a good enough job of actually looking at, well, how am I coming across to this person? I just jumped into being defensive, thinking it was all them. So yeah, it's one thing to say, it's a completely different thing to actually do it.
Right, right. Yeah, it reminds me of Peterson's notion of treating yourself like you're someone that you really care about, like a friend that you really care about. Um, and I think part of that is also comes back to treating other people that way too, because if you're treating yourself that way, then you're also naturally gonna carry that onto others. And I think that one of the roots of these conflicts that we get into with other people and these arguments and resentments and disputes is that we actually don't accept ourselves. Like we don't, not acceptance is a weird word, but we're not being fully honest. We're not being fully transparent with ourselves. We're not really embracing what's happening for us. And so it's like defensive mechanisms that we build in order so we don't have to feel that uncomfortable feeling that we know that we would feel if we were really true in that moment, if we really address that moment in the way that would be the most impactful and the most reasonable and the most beneficial. Like there's this this comes from one of the coaching handbooks that we use at the Earth-Based Institute, but there's these different statements, and one is I value you, I don't value me. I value me, I don't value you. And then there's I don't value me, I don't value you. And then there's I value you, I value me. And anyways, the point is that like typically we get into these places where we're sacrificing ourselves for others, or we're sacrificing others for ourselves, or we're just burning the whole damn thing down and sacrificing both. Where the ideal place to get to is where you can actually have a conversation with someone, no matter how hostile or difficult it could feel, and come from an authentic place of I value me, I value you. I want what's best for me, and I want what's best for you. And I trust that if we both step into that attitude, that good will come about. And so, just come full circle here, Andrew, with this guy's comment on your YouTube video. And people, if you want to see that, go to Sorting Myself Out, the YouTube channel, and look at the more recent video that came out. I think what was it called, Andrew? Just so everyone knows.
Well, I was trying to think of a title, and I knew it was an announcement, but not a big announcement. So I called it Medium Announcement.
Yeah. Okay. So Medium Announcement came out. It's July 27th today. So it came out July 26th. And check that out just to get some context here. But really, like that type of comment, when I read that, what it says is like, I don't value you. Like it's not it's not coming from this place of, hey, Andrew, like I'm really worried about you, man. Like I'd love to support you. I'd love to hear how you could do this better, because I'm a little concerned about the way things have been going on your channel. So like that type of attitude, it feels so much more beneficial. And then when somebody hears that, they let their guard down. And so all of a sudden it's like, you don't have to lock horns. You can talk like human beings.
I think I talked to Jordan Peterson about this, because as you're saying those four different character types, I've also heard it as I'm okay, you're okay, I'm not okay, you're not okay. So
Same thing, yeah.
Yeah, you're right. He was probably coming from a position of him thinking that he's okay and that I'm not okay.
Yeah.
So where the communication was coming to, because it was coming from that view, it reached a different part of me. Where if he, as you said, if it was coming from a place of him thinking that we're both okay, then you can only really have that true communication when you're both equal.
Right.
And I'm just trying to think, because what I said to Peterson, the way I view that is that it's not that the best view is to always be I'm okay, you're okay, because some people aren't okay.
Right.
And it's a matter of being able to be in that center and not be any one of those four characters, but to be able to shift into a different role when it's necessary. And that is something I've been working on. That like I've always been more of an agreeable person, and after listening to Peterson and being more aware of this, I've had times where I've had to step out of that comfort role to try to be disagreeable. And I've found that the more times that I've done it, it's gotten easier. And where at first, so years ago, when I wouldn't try to do that, it would be as if I was building up this resentment. And so the times where it would come out, it was just over the top and way too aggressive. And now it's not like that anymore. So the most recent one I can think of was in the Auckland airport in New Zealand. So when you're going through security, you know how they have those lines with the ropes? You get to the end of one line and it's turning around a corner to go to another. There's like a wide berth. You don't just go right around the rope. You sort of go to the end knowing that you could just go around the rope, but you go into the end because you want to leave more space for people. And this woman, she just tried to go right around it. And I just immediately called her out, not from any place of me thinking, I'm okay, you're not okay. It was, we're both okay. And I just sort of said to her, oh, are you trying to just get in front of me? And looked a little embarrassed and then went back behind me.
That's great, man. I love that. So you used what Peterson calls minimal necessary force.
Yeah, that's it.
Yeah, he talks about that a lot. I like how you said it's not always about being in one quadrant or another. It's about knowing being aware enough of yourself and of others to know which quadrant you need to be in a given moment. Like, for example, if you started trying to beat my girlfriend up, that would be a situation where you're not okay. Right? So like, that's pretty obvious. Like it's not like in that situation, I need to be striving to think that you're okay or to treat you like you're okay. I actually need to stop that situation as soon as possible. So I think that that's a very good point. And how do you know, like, you know, I think it seems like in most situations, it's good to respect. It seems like, I mean, I could be wrong, I don't know, but it seems like in most situations, it's good to assume respect for the person that you're talking to at some level, even if you disagree with them. That's what it seems like. What do you think of that?
Ideally, your first assumption of someone should be that they are intelligent, where it's like, think anyone who's listening to this, and I'm sure for yourself, you can think of that one person who just thinks everyone's an idiot and everyone's so stupid, and that's all that they focus on. And they're maybe not realizing that they're just assuming that and then only looking for that. Or just the type of person who always complains. It's like, can they not see that maybe it's something within their selves? So I think ideally you'd come from a place of assuming at first that someone is intelligent and is nice, and rather than just thinking the worst of everyone right off the bat.
Yeah, absolutely. And we all make mistakes, and we all get into moods, and some of us more than others, right? I mean, just the other day, we're at my family's place here in Maine. We come up to Maine every summer and hang out at this beautiful lake. And my brother and I got into like a ridiculous dispute. And I just like let the worst aspects of my nature take over, just totally out of character, like stuff that I probably haven't, attitudes that I haven't really had since I was 15 years old, and maybe 16, 17, something like that. But the point is that it happens, and it was humbling because I realized, like, wow, like I'm not special. I don't have some special sauce or some special juice that nobody else has. I failed that situation. I let my brother down. I let my family down. I lost my temper. And so it's good to have that humility to know that and to learn from that failure. And now I can like have this conversation with you with a new sense of humility and a new sense of curiosity about life, because, you know, I've just been knocked down a few pegs, and it's not in a bad way. I think it's actually good that happened. Very, very good, even though it's painful.
Yeah, I think we don't expect that it won't ever happen. It's more so that we're aware of it when it's happening, where the younger version of myself wouldn't have been aware and seen it for the negative thing that it is, like the hot coal that I'm just holding in my hand, thinking it's something I have to hold on to and it's going to make me right, not seeing how much it's damaging myself. And yeah, I remember a couple of years ago working the same job I am now, but when I was working in the office, there was this woman in the office who just wanted a very nice lady, but just talks too much and all, what can I say? Will come to you for anything that you could just simply put in an email and take 30 minutes to ask you a simple question. So I found that annoying at times, even though there was many times where we'd have nice conversations and I enjoyed talking to her. I can't remember what it was, but there was something where a bit of a conflict started. And I remember that I could just feel it. I could feel the ego operating, knowing that I was just making myself angry and making an uncomfortable feeling in the office. I knew it, but I just held on to it. Where years ago I would have acted in that way, but just didn't know that I was wrong in doing it. And I think the more times we can be aware of it, that it won't last as long. And same again, when I was coming back from my recent trip, I'd just been traveling for so long and these long flights, and I always find the longest part of a flight is when the plane lands. The amount of time it takes to taxi and for them to open the door and people get their luggage. I was looking at some guy thinking, oh, this guy's an asshole. And as soon as I don't know why I thought it, who knows, just a look on his face or something. But I remember right in the moment going, oh wait, I'm really bothered and annoyed. I've had a long flight. And who am I to say that about him?
Right.
So at least I feel like I can't prevent that thought from happening.
Right.
Feeling a certain way, but at least we can be aware of it. And like how I mentioned earlier about throwing darts, ideally if you have your first throw, you see that it's off, you'll adjust from there. But if your ego is going, no, I'm right, it just maybe released from my hand wrong or there was wind, you'll throw it again and you'll be off. So I think that's what the game is once you're aware of it, can you make the adjustment from there?
Yeah, that's a great point. Yeah, and I think also, there's another quote that I like, that the only failure is the failure to learn, which is helpful too. And, no matter how far the scale down you go, you can make those adjustments. It's never too late to turn the boat around, and that's coming from someone who's in sobriety and recovery from addiction and alcoholism, right? So I think that's an important message for people to hear, that, that we can always start over, and reassess, reorient ourselves with our environment and adjust. And instead of, like you said, holding that hot coal is such a good example, holding on so tight, not wanting to let go, being afraid to let go, not having the courage or whatever it would be, and just taking that leap of faith. And I think it does take a lot of courage and humility, because I have to admit that I don't know. As I am now, I am uncertain of the answers, and I am uncertain of the right way forward, and I don't know where to stand. I don't feel like I have solid ground to orient myself towards reality with. And I think that right there, there's something about that leap of faith, that something happens, like something synchronicity, or this might sound a little mystical, but the universe responds in some sort of way. The world responds. The life responds to that leap of faith somehow, even if it's just in your mind. Something changes, something significant.
Yeah, it's as if when you're riding that fine line between chaos and order, but you're trying to assure yourself that, no, I'm right, I have order, even though all these signs are pointing to you that you are in chaos. I think it's when you admit that you're in chaos and you dive into it is when you find the way back to order. And it's a new order, where maybe the one you had before, or you thought you had before, was was working, but it's something that needs to be continuously reformed and addressed. And that's what I found in my life. And that's when I first started listening to Peterson. He put into perspective what had happened in my life. I'd just seen that so many times in my life, I was in order, went into chaos, back and forth. And the most recent time when I went into chaos and felt so down about it and depressed to the point where I was considering not continuing on anymore, I thought, okay, never again. I'm not going to try to create any order, because the future is an illusion. It's only going to bring me pain. I suffer because I desire. I'm just not going to desire. But living like that, it just made things worse. And that's where I realized, okay, I need to choose my sacrifice and at least be aiming towards something, knowing that it's not about getting that, but it's the process of working towards it, and being humble enough and letting that ego dissolve, where you can admit where you're wrong and make those adjustments.
Yeah, that's well put. You remember when he said, I think on Rogan's show, he said, talking about realizing that you're mostly dead wood. Remember that?
I remember him. Yeah, I don't remember that specifically, but yeah, I've heard him talk about that a few times. Yeah.
Yeah, basically the notion that like at the core of who we are is some sort of essential, true, divine spark of the self, right? Even in psychological terms, but let's just, for the sake of the hell of it, say just in general, there's that core self. And what is, and I'm using my own words, I'm not representing Peterson here, but what is surrounding that is a bunch of either ways of relating to the world, ways of being in relationship to other people, ways of thinking, habit patterns, actions, stuff like that, mindsets. And he's saying, what he said was, 90% of, you might find that 90% of you is dead wood, which means aspects of the psyche that are performing functions that are no longer useful, that are actually not serving that core truth or that core divinity. And so I think it's a fascinating and important realization, because just like what happened to me the other day, is what I realized is, wow, like I still have a function inside of me that is performing a set of, you could even look at it from a neurological point of view, a set of synaptic connections that is not serving me. So that you could consider that dead wood. And the way that you get rid of that dead wood is you got to burn it off. But the problem is it hurts to burn it off, right? That's the ego sacrifice that you're talking about. Because then I have to admit that I'm wrong, which isn't fun. I don't think many people like doing that. And then I also, not only do I have to admit that I'm wrong, I have to admit that I'm wrong and look around and realize that I don't know actually who I am anymore, because that's part of my identity. And so it's both ego deflation and an identity crisis in one. And that's chaos. That's the hero's journey, right? That Peterson talks about. You're voluntarily descending into chaos so that you can reascend and articulate order out of that chaos and, fulfill that cycle. What's crazy about it is that process never stops. You don't just do that one time. You got to do it like over and over again, because there's always going to be new parts of yourself that need to burn off more deadwood. And so it hurts. It's like, and that's why I think his notion of life isn't about being happy. It's about being meaningfully engaged. That really resonates with me, because being meaningfully engaged doesn't mean you're pain-free. It means you're constantly immersing yourself in doing the right thing, no matter what the consequences are. And I, for one, can admit that that's not easy for me. I mean, I'd prefer to be comfortable. I'd prefer to take the easier route. And so it's a lot of work psychologically to start moving in a different direction and continuing to hold myself to that discipline.
Well, yeah, and it can be terrifying at the same time. I remember a couple of years ago, I had a dream where I was a black man. Maybe I was mixed, part black, part white, and I had an afro and a goatee, and I was looking in the mirror, and then I woke up, and I just didn't know who I was for a few moments, and because we feel like we know ourselves by what our habits are, what our desires are, what our actions are, and when you feel so identified by that, it can be terrifying to let go. Like I had an experience in waking life where for so long I was identified as a rugby player, someone who's traveling. And then when that wasn't an option for me anymore, I just felt like who am I? What am I? Look at how many professional athletes go through that crisis when they're transitioning from their professional career till their retirement. But what I've really found the struggle is I can see the dead wood. I just find it so difficult to let go of the habits. And I feel like I can see this battle that's going on in the mind where there's a part of me that wants to be healthy by eating well and exercising. And that's just consistently there. That's always there. But the desire to eat an entire extra large meat lover's pizza will occasionally rear its head. And at first you can put it away, say, oh, I'm committed. I've just started this new diet. It pops up, you can push it away. But eventually it comes back and you go, oh, I've been doing okay. It's just this one time. I'll get back to it tomorrow. Where I feel as if as soon as that battle's created in the mind, you've already lost.
Mm-hmm.
It's not that the thinker is separate from thought. It's just thought of itself. So I'm trying to find a way to just observe and not
react.
Try to push away. And I had it recently where I was at a friend's birthday and someone brought out these red velvet cupcakes. And I just automatically felt as if I'm going to eat one. I mean, I struggle for a while to not, but ultimately I know that I'm going to. And I did. So what I'm trying to work on is that I see the pattern in myself that if I do that, if I give in to temptation, I'll feel bad, I'll feel guilty, and it enables me to go, well, whatever, just
sabotage.
I can eat whatever. And I'll do that for a few days where I guess that's the part of, sure, I'm just talking about diet right now, but think of this for any habit, that if you were to build in a cheat day, it's a way of having that release and not feeling guilty because it's planned in. And something that's been consistent with me and what people have seen on my YouTube channel is that it seems like I always come up with this grand schedule that will get me towards the life that I want. But what I've realized now in my fourth time doing the future authoring program is that I want to make an actual ideal day that I want to live, rather than just thinking, oh, I'm going to fill up this day of all these things that could get me to a great place, but it still isn't an ideal day. And it's, that's what I'm doing. That's what I'm trying to discover.
I love that. It reminds me of that notion of tyrannizing yourself, like being too rigid and too reactive and too having too high of expectations and not just aiming for what you could do that you'd want to do, but giving yourself like these impossible perfect standards. And then the other piece about what you're saying is, it was interesting. You said, I knew I was going to eat it anyway. I'm curious, is that a part of you that is saying like, I want that thing so bad that nobody can stop me? Or is it just a self-defeating prophecy, self-fulfilling?
I felt just resigned to the fact because it's happened so many times before. And it was probably at least an hour where I was, from when I first had that thought to when I actually ate it. And just in my mind, I was going like, just try to think of all the positive things. If you get back in shape, and if you say no this time, it'll be easier the next time to say no. And if you give in this time, it will be even easier to give in the next time. I was just cycling through that. But from the very beginning, I told myself, I'm going to have this battle in my mind, but in the end, the desire to eat it is going to be stronger and win out over the desire to be healthy. Because like I
Right.
said, it's weird that the desire to be healthier is consistent and always there. And it's that battle of delayed gratification. But when that one desire comes to eat it, it just, like I said, at first you can push it away, but it will find its way to give you any excuse, and you go, okay, whatever, I'll just have it.
Oh yeah, it reminds me of in 12-step programs, people talk about the voice of the addictive self or the alcoholic self, and how it has these cunning and powerful and overwhelming justifications, overwhelming energy that will just come in and just like run the show, and just it holds you hostage.
Yeah, and I think that's, to me, what meditation is a way of understanding thought and being able to use thought for what it's meant for. Like if I want to learn a language or drive from here to wherever, Kalamazoo, I need to use thought. Thought is necessary. Like say when we have meditation, it's not that we're trying to eliminate thought. It's a way of allowing thought to find its proper place and operate where it needs to.
Mm-hmm.
So when I'm having all of my thoughts concentrated on a cupcake, I don't think that's thought operating in a proper way.
No, I understand. Yeah, and it's interesting how that, well, you could call it, I think a word that I've heard it used is the shame cycle, where you're worried you're going to do it, so then you do it, and then you're ashamed about doing it, and then you feel there's like a trauma or whatever you want to call it. There's an imprint that creates, and so then you do it even more, and then it's just like it's a vortex. It just keeps, it's a black hole really, and there's no end to it in of itself. The only thing that can get you out of it is something different than what got you into it, and so it's like trying to solve a math equation with missing variables. And it's like you need those extra variables to come in and like extricate you from that situation. It's very difficult, and it's hard too to take the judgment out of it. It's like one thing that I like to tell people about relapse, whether it's in coaching or just working with people in general, is that relapse isn't a failure. Because so many people think relapse is a failure. And that's such a big misconception, because no, relapse isn't a failure. It depends on what kind of relapse you're talking about. You had a mistake, there's a slip up, which is like, oh yeah, I had a bad moment. I had a bad night. Then there's like a full out, like 3-week, 3-month, 3-year type of thing. Well, I went back on the streets and I was doing heroin. That's big deal. But the failure is, again, like the quote that I said earlier, the failure to learn from it. And it's like, what happened? Because if we relapse, what that really shows us is that there was something about us that we didn't understand when we created the goal of abstinence, or of whatever you could consider relapse, anything, relapse of behavior, relapse of substance, relapse of food, it doesn't matter. But there was something that we didn't account for. Mm-hmm. And so like the first tendency for people that I've noticed, including myself, is to go into reactive. Something must be wrong with me, or, F it doesn't matter anyway, that type of thinking. Versus, what did I miss? Oh, that's interesting. Wow, interesting. What happened here? How did this take place? You know what I mean? It's just a totally different quality. And it's like that Peterson says, it's treating yourself like you're someone that you care about. If you're someone you cared about ate a cupcake, would you roast them over the coals and tell them to eat 10 more? Or would you ask them, what did you learn about yourself? How can you do better?
Yeah, you wouldn't say to them, oh, well, you had one, you might as well eat all of them. You might as well.
No. Exactly.
I've thought it. I haven't learned the lesson for me, like with marijuana, when I got over that, where I went from having it every day to now having it if I'm with a friend or if the opportunity presents itself. Part of it was by writing out the future of what would happen if it continued in the way I was abusing it. Also recognizing my excuses and habits. That helped. But also part of it was moving in with my parents, where I just knew like it's something I just couldn't do around the house. Mm. So I'm trying to find a way to do that with my other habits as well. And when I first started thinking about these issues of that battle in the mind, I thought, what would it be like, say as we're approaching artificial intelligence and if we merge with machinery, what if you had a way of at the beginning of your day, setting out your day as if you were a character in a video game and say, all right, I do not want to have any desires to eat a cupcake. Mm-hmm. And if you push that to your life, what if you wanted to program in, never, I will never, ever be tempted, no matter who offers me to eat one, I'm not going to eat it. Mm-hmm. Well, what happens if you get married, you have a daughter or a son or a child you don't impose a gender on, and they bake you a cupcake and you said, no, but Dad, I made this for you. And they're crying, no, I don't want it. Like, so that programmer, it's like, who is that? It feels like in my mind, I'm just always shifting. You're just shifting one position back, but it's like, I don't know if there is an actual thing at the back. Like, I think I heard Alan Watts use an analogy as some robbers enter a house, and when the cops are coming, they go up to the next floor, and then when the cops go up to the next floor, they just keep going up. Mm-hmm. It's like we're trying to do that with the ego, where I feel like the real me is the one who wants to be healthy and consistent, and it's not me when the thought comes in to eat something. But so I don't want to have a mechanical life where it's not that I'd ever have any desires again. I'd wish to be able to be present enough to observe those desires without trying to push them away or give in to them, but just to be able to be that observer. And I think, is that what separates us from the animals? That an animal will just be completely governed by desire. We know that we can delay gratification. Some are better at it than others. But for me, how do I, like, there's certain gratifications that I can delay with no problem. But for me, if it comes to food or other things, I don't know how to delay. And at times I just feel useless and feel like, well, it's just always going to be this way.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I hear you, man. I'm curious, like, just as a thought experiment, when were the times where, what was going on in your life during the times where food wasn't an issue? Where, not like recent, in the last couple of years, where you weren't even having to worry about it, like you were just good?
When I was in Tonga, not recently, although being there recently, I did a lot better than I had been doing before I went there. And then towards the end of my trip, I thought, I'm on vacation. I'll just, and plus I'd gotten my job back where I had previously lost it and had money coming in. I'm like, whatever, I'll just go to restaurants. But the first time I was there, and when I was staying with this family and I wasn't the one cooking, that was something, knowing that you have very limited options. I wasn't thinking about it, where so often it's something that's always on my mind. I'm always looking forward to the next meal. And I think I said this to someone recently, where, say, watching a television show or a movie, if there's a scene where food got wasted, I found it affected me. I was like, I want that. It's just so often been something on my mind. But being in a culture where, say in Tonga or Polynesia, it would be rude to eat food by yourself. It's a shared experience. So for me, it's been so much of this pleasure in being by myself, and usually eating while watching a movie or TV. when I was there, that it wasn't that experience. I didn't have to, it wasn't a matter of contemplating the next meal and going off of desires. It was just, well, this is what's available to you, and you're eating as a family or with friends. So if I'm by myself, I'll just eat really fast and just have all my focus on that. Where if I'm eating, that's what I ideally have, a life where I'm not having any meals alone. And then I don't think it would be as big of an issue for me.
Yeah, that's interesting. I was also thinking too, times in my life where I've fall prey to my lesser habits or my less desirable aspects of personality. Sometimes they happen when I have like too much downtime or not a lot of meaning or not a lot going on. Like, just for me, I don't know if it's true for you, but like, for example, when we have students come in for trainings for a week, I'm pretty focused all week. I don't get distracted with my thoughts too much. I don't get into like any depression or any like negative cycles. I'm pretty strong. And then maybe like a couple of weeks later, like all of a sudden I could start just totally feeling horrible and just like not enjoying my life and not feeling very fulfilled. And I just noticed that a lot of times it's those times when I don't have something in front of me that is meaningful enough or is like feels good enough. It's like, well, what's the next best thing then is to find something, it's like that cupcake's better than an empty hole. And if there's a feeling of an empty hole, then it's like, of course you ate the cupcake. It makes sense. I'm not saying that that's how you feel. I'm just espousing hypotheticals here, but it's just an interesting concept to think about. I know for myself, it's definitely these patterns will come and go depending on what's going on around me.
Well, I think that's part of the future authoring program is it breaks your life into different components. So your work life, your social life, your family life, how you're going to regulate drug or alcohol use. Just considers all these things, and you're building a life where you're laying out what you'd like to be doing in a day. And for a lot of people who just wake up in the morning, go to work, come home, the outdoors is just a place between work and home. A lot of people, you can just think of a life where they're coming home and playing a video game, eating a few pizza pockets, drinking Mountain Dew, and watching pornography, smoking some weed. It's just that's their life. Where if they had really thought out their life, what they'd really like to be doing, and you imagine a future where, oh, maybe I'm part of some sports team or some sort of club, and I'm going out with my friends to go swimming. If you'd filled it with all these other things, your mind wouldn't be constantly looking to fill that void with all these fleeting temporary pleasures that will bring pain. And
exactly.
Then that cycle of feeling that pain and wanting away from that pain and filling it with the pleasure that just keeps bringing the pain.
Yeah, that makes sense. Are you familiar with any like mainstream brain science at all?
No, I wouldn't say that I am.
So there's this part of our brain, and I'm not anywhere. You couldn't even put me in kindergarten science, so just let me give it a shot. But there's this part of our brain called the reticular activating system. And the reticular activating system is, I've heard it described by this book that Larry Kendall wrote called your onboard search engine, like a Google search. So you just plug in what it is that you want, and your reticular, it's unconscious. It's a part of your unconscious brain. It will just look for that everywhere. So like this is why, like, if you ever buy a car, you'll just start seeing that car everywhere. Yeah. You know what I mean? It's simple brain science, right? So the reticular activating system picks up, it filters things that you've decided are important to you. Peterson talks about this in Maps of Meaning too. Like, if this is my goal, what my brain is going to search for is all the things that will help me get there and all the things that are getting in my way. So threat, and he calls it threat and promise, or threat and hope, right? And so, what happens if threat takes over, then we get thrown back into chaos and we descend back to the unknown, and then we're not oriented towards our goal anymore and we have to reorient. But ideally, you're like constantly oriented towards that goal in a meaningful way, that you're not too comfortable, but you're not too panicked, and you're right on that edge, right? So anyways, the reticular activating system is basically the cliche, what you focus on expands, right? So if I tell myself, I want to get out of debt, right? What this guy Kendall talks about is, well, then what's going to happen is your brain is going to focus on debt, and you're actually probably going to get into worse debt. And so I thought that was fascinating. He said, instead, focus on, I want to be free and clear. I want to be free and clear, meaning free and clear financially. And so it's just this way that we program our brain. It seems to have a significant impact on the way that we orient ourselves towards what's useful and what's not useful to us. And we don't even know, like, here's another cliche, non-scientist science statement. We're picking up apparently like 10, or I think it's 2 to 4 billion. We're picking up like billions of bits of information a second. Okay, that's what's important to remember. But we only consciously process like 2 to 10,000 or something in that range. And so it's just remembering that most of what we do, most of what I'm saying right now, most of how I'm relating to you, most of how I've gone through my day has been unconscious. Involuntary processes of engagement that have been programmed by my desire system, that have been programmed by partly conditioning, partly genetics, partly goals that I've set for myself, partly traumatic experiences that I might have had in my life, partly fears. Like, it's all packed in. I think it's a fascinating notion. Anyways, what you were saying about the cupcake reminded me of that.
Yeah, perception is selection. We leave way more out than we take in. And I've played with that.
I like that. I'm going to write that down. Perception is selection.
And for anyone who's listening, I think I've mentioned this exercise before. I got it from Robert Anton Wilson's book, Prometheus Rising. It's pick whatever number you want. Don't make it too big. Like for me, I picked 77. And I just looked for it, knowing that, like how you mentioned about the vehicle, that happened to me. Or I remember the first time I'd ever heard of Burberry, I started hearing it and seeing it all the time. So I did it with the number 77, and it's unbelievable how much you'll notice it, and also how much it seems the more that you look for it, the more it looks for you, because it can get to a pretty weird place. And I know for myself, let's say with women, I always had this feeling that anyone who would be attracted to me is someone who I wouldn't be attracted to, and anyone who I'm attracted to would never be attracted to me. And looking from that lens, it just would always come true. And by trying to change that lens, it's had changes in my life. And same for money. I've just found in my life that for most of my life, I always thought, I'm going to be poor. I'll never have enough money. And I was living that out. But recently I just find that somehow by looking to imagine myself as someone who's wealthy, not that I'm looking for money to hold on and have it from an ego point of view, but just to have it as a tool to live my life and not be limited. I found that's to me is what a part of what prayer is. It's not that I'm specifically asking to be given to it. Like you said earlier, if the focus is on debt and feeling, I don't want to be debt, then that's a matter of expanding, where I've just tried to use it as an exercise to envision a future where my desire has come true, and just focus on that feeling.
That's great.
Most of my life, it was the opposite, as you said, just putting more attention on the thing that I don't want to happen.
Right. And I think that this is also laid out in Maps of Meaning by Peterson, is the reason that our threats, I think he says it in there, probably heard it from, I'm pretty sure it was from him in Maps of Meaning, but the threat system is activated more easily in our brains, the threat circuitry, because survival is actually more important than most of everything else. So if your threat circuits aren't the primary response to reality, am I safe is really like got to be the first question, right? Am I safe? Am I secure? Do I have a place where I can live and survive? If you're not able to answer those questions, then you're not going to be able to build off of that hierarchy of needs, like Maslow's hierarchy or whatever it's called. So I think that it's important to remember that the game is a little bit rigged for us to be fearful. I mean, when we set goals, when we want to work on something, we're gonna get threat responses. We're gonna go into that limbic fear, and it's okay. It's just a matter of, like you said earlier, being aware of it so that we can adjust, throw a dart again, and be mindful, learn how to regulate our nervous system, and learn how to focus on something else. So it's practice.
As you were saying that, you just made me think. A few months ago, I was in a car accident. It was just on a highway, going at say around 100 kilometers per hour. I don't know, what is that in miles? 60. But anyways,
I don't know, 70, I think.
Yeah, it all in front of me. I could just, all of a sudden, all I saw was brake lights, and I thought,
man.
oh, like as soon as I saw it, I just tapped on my brakes right away, and then it wasn't the person behind me. The person behind them, then hit me, and that was my first time being in an accident like that. And I mean, I've gone off the road before, but the impact hit me so much and really shook me. Like for like an hour after, I just felt so shaky. Since then, now when I'm driving, I'm just so much more aware of it. And I just where before I used to, say you get to an intersection, you get to a stop, you just sort of, move your head, but you're not really looking. Now, because of that, I feel so much more focused, and I'll still get that feeling of impact, just like feeling that it's there as a threat at any time. So I feel like we have a way of using that system in a positive way. Like if it took over and had so much anxiety to the point where I couldn't drive, that obviously we don't want that, but I feel like I've been able to allow it to operate in a way that's just
useful,
more safe, and
that's great. I love that. That's cool. That's a great story about integrating fear rather than being controlled by it. So often we're controlled by it. Like being controlled by it would be like you can't get in the damn car because you're shaking
right
every time and you can't think about driving. But being more cautious is like learning from it and allowing yourself to adjust. I like that a lot. I've got a question for you here. Is it okay if we transition into something else?
Sure. Yep.
Okay, so what tips would you give others about how to change based on what you've learned so far? Like if you had a guy who was just like you 2 years ago or 2.5 years ago or whatever it was, and not exactly like you, but just like you in the sense that they didn't know what to do, that they felt out of control, and they needed to change. What would be like the first directions that you would give them?
Well, try to figure out exactly what it is that you want. Where you might have just this notion that this idea of one day I'll get there, and you just sort of have a general idea that you haven't really fleshed out, and maybe that's hard for you. Try a thought experiment of, if I won the lottery, if I never had to worry about money again, how would I live out my days? Where that can be difficult. And if you find that difficult, try to also at the same time think out, like, well, how bad could my life be? What is the life I don't want? What is it that on my deathbed that I would regret the most if I continued what I'm acting out today until the day I die? What would be my biggest regret? And when it comes to implementing the change, just go for thinking, what's the smallest amount that I can change that I know I can commit to? And that's still advice I need for myself. It seems that every time I plan to make a change, I aim for this big dramatic change that maybe I can do for a little bit, but then I'll fall off because it's just too much. Where if you just had those small incremental changes, knowing what they could lead to over time, that's where it is. That's where the change is going to happen. And also, there's a difference between having a physical change. Like say you want to learn a language. One, yeah, you're going to need the motivation to do it. It's not just going to happen by itself. You can't just say, I want to learn Spanish and expect that you're going to spend 15 minutes a day doing it. Really find why you want to do it and what it could be, and you have that motivation. Like for me, when I learned Tongan, I wanted to live in Tonga. I wanted to be able to communicate with Tongans in their language, and so I had the motivation, and I learned it. There's a difference between that type of learning and having that change than there is between an emotional habit or a way of seeing things. Like say if I'm a really jealous person and I see that it's not serving me, I don't think that that's the same way you can change through time as you would learning a language. That those type of changes don't happen because of time. Sure, they may happen in time, but it's only by really seeing it and paying attention to it that the change happens. It's more of a radical change. Like for me, I remember growing up in a small town in Ontario where it's mainly white people. Maybe like in our small town, there was one black family, one Asian family. That's it, right? So a lot of kids were racist and or would just repeat, I guess, jokes that we'd hear parents say. I'm not saying that my parents are racist. But so within the schoolyard, that's how we'd act. And I just remember being kind of racist. And then I just saw one day that it was wrong. It wasn't something that I had to go, oh, I need to work on this and change. It was just in a moment of seeing and by paying attention to it that there was a radical change. So just know in your life that, yeah, some things are going to take time, like learning a language, learning an instrument. You have to have the proper motivation for that. But for other aspects of yourself that you'd like to change, you have to learn to really pay attention to them and see what they are.
I like that a lot. That distinction of concrete goals versus more psycho-spiritual, psycho-emotional goals. That's a really important distinction. Yeah, thanks for sharing that. And also the piece around it's more about being aware of it rather than expecting that thought to change all of a sudden.
Yeah, that awareness can create the change. It's as if, say you have a song stuck in your head. There's another part of you that's annoyed by it. So it's like we've split ourselves into two. Again, like I was saying earlier about that battle with the cupcake, where ideally if you were able to just observe without wanting to change. Same in science, that when we observe that which we observe changes, it's the same within ourselves. If you're able to give that attention without an expectation of wanting it to be different and trying to manipulate it, you'll see that it will change. So even just try this. That's what I started off when I first started meditation, was seeing how much my mind would chatter. And then by putting the attention on it, not concentration, I'd say concentration is different and is from will and desire and it's limited. But just by having that attention, you'll see that thoughts will just die away. And that when they arise, it's not that you're trying to put it away and think, oh, I shouldn't be thinking. You just, in attention, things will change.
Paying attention. Yeah. And then the other piece that I'm curious about too, that I might add, is to have the intention. Just the general desire, hey, I'd like this to be different.
Yeah, and again, that's part of it. That's
Right.
identifying what the goals are and having the intention.
Right.
And yeah, intention's so meaningful.
Right.
Like I was just talking to a friend earlier about my videos that I make, and he's saying like, yeah, if you're having the intention to help yourself and help others, then what does it matter if you're getting some negative reactions or
Right.
you're getting money or not getting money? Where yeah, I'm trying. That's something I'm trying to evaluate in my life, is really see what my intentions are, because I think a lot of people, they're just not aware of what they are, and when they really see
Right.
it the first time, that's when like I said, just by putting that attention on it, the change will happen of itself, where an action that's based on desire and thought is limited, because thought's always in the shadow of ignorance. Knowledge is
Right.
in the shadow of ignorance, where in attention, an action can come that's not based on from the self, from desire, and that's where we have our best actions, and where that change can naturally occur.
That's amazing. I love that. That's a really well put answer. It's perfectly fitting for the content on this show. And I can't believe there's people out there who's trying to say you haven't worked on yourself, man. I mean, just that, I mean, that answer right there, one of my teachers that I go to at in New Jersey is Tom Brown Jr. And he always says the difference between knowledge and wisdom. And the knowledge is to know something, but wisdom is to have had experienced it and integrated it into your life, to know it intimately, to know it deep in your bones. And that answer that you shared was indicating that you have wisdom from experience, not just knowledge that you've read in a book, not just things that you've heard other people say, but you've experienced these things, that you've applied them to your life, that you are sorting yourself out, so to speak, and that you're in that process, you're engaged. And I'm not saying that it's always true, just like it's not always true for anybody, but I think it's a really important distinction to make, the difference between knowledge and wisdom. And it's just funny how, you know, people can make these assumptions about people they don't even know.
Well, I mean, yeah, I can see in myself that in many ways I have changed and progressed. And that's what this person who wrote that comment had issue with, saying, like, what, are you kidding me? How you haven't changed?
You haven't changed one bit.
Because if you view it in a certain way, whether it's someone else looking at me or me looking at myself, I could say, well, when I first started this channel, I was 215 pounds. I've gone up to 250, so I regressed there. I'm still living at home. I don't have much in savings. It's a matter of what I can focus on. Yeah, certain things haven't changed and I haven't made progress, but in other areas I have. And like you said, if I just focus on feeling that I haven't changed, that's where I get stuck in that vortex of getting pulled down into hell, that bottomless pit. But
well, everything that you've said has been incredibly useful to me, and I hope that I think it will also be to the listeners. And man, keep going, keep us posted with your progress. I think it's just really cool what you're doing, and it's really awesome that you'll come on my show. I think that's a cool opportunity that you've provided, so I appreciate it.
Hey, it's my pleasure, and I'll come on anytime you invite me.
Awesome. Well, that's great. Well, thank you everyone for listening to the Soul Tree podcast. I do have a Patreon account. It'll be in the description, and please subscribe if you are enjoying the show. Andrew, thank you very much for coming on. Check out Sorting Myself Out on YouTube. It is an awesome channel. Really well done. The videography, I have to say, has improved significantly. In some of those videos. I mean, you've done some pretty awesome video editing, and it looks like you have a nice camera that captures things very well.
Thanks. Yeah, it's just one of those things that just by doing it, I've improved, and I've enjoyed it. So thank you.
The other thing too I've noticed is you include some awesome shots of nature, the ocean, the forests, the lakes. It's just that in of itself has been like a really great reason to watch your videos. It's just the way that you capture those moments.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
You're welcome. All right, everyone.